friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kayla, and if you're not new, thanks for coming back. Always happy to have you. Today I'm super excited for today's video. We have some spring book recommendations, or books that just feel like spring. Honestly, spring has typically been one of my least favorite seasons, but in past years I've really come to enjoy springtime and things coming back to life and escaping the winter and the cold and things just kind of resetting and being light and airy and refreshed. There's just some kind of joy that comes with the sunshine of spring. So I wanted to make a video that shared some of the books that I think feel like spring, have perfect spring vibes, and just talk about some spring books. If you have any spring books or books that you typically associate with spring or think have a really great spring vibe, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear those and learn more about and add to my TBR. So if you have any spring recommendations, make sure you leave them in the comments for me, share the love, and some springtime reads. But today we're talking about spring books. Go grab yourself something to drink. I have a nice little iced coffee going with my springtime nail color, and let's talk about books. I'm also in a state of moving right now, so I don't have a lot of these books here, but if I do have them, I'll show them. If not, I will put a picture on the screen for you guys. I did this with my Dark Academia book recommendations, where I talked about what certain things a book needed to have for me to fit the description of Dark Academia. There are similar groups of books that I think I associate with spring. I've talked about winter being like classics, dark academia, some mysteries, things like that. Spring for me feels very much the season of Regency romance, light academia, classics that are a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit brighter, have happy endings, those kinds of things, and like just cottagecore fairy tale fantasy books. That's what I think of when I think of spring reads. That's what I'm in the mood to read during springtime. Don't really know why, but that's what feels like spring to me. So if there's something different that feels like a spring book for you, let me know in the comments. Let's chat about it. What I'm now realizing is maybe part of this whole thing for me is a specific color palette. We're gonna talk about each of these. I have no particular order for how these books are gonna go. We're just gonna chat about them and see what they come up with. The first book that I have that I've actually never read, but I've been wanting to read forever, is Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. That is, I feel like I associate Studio Ghibli movies and that whole like whimsical, enchanting vibe with springtime. Basically the book follows Sophie, who is a young girl who encounters a witch called the Witch of Waste, who turns her into an old woman, and she has to go on this whole adventure through this like mysterious castle in the distance to find the cure to break her curse. Feels very lighthearted. It's a middle grade, so it feels very easy, whimsical, kind of enchanting, silly sort of reading, which I just associate with springtime. So Howls Moving Castle is my first one. It is also a series, which I didn't realize. I have the book somewhere. I just don't know where at this point. I don't have them here, but I have read them and I love these books. I've reviewed them here on this channel, and that is The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. The Guinevere Deception is one of my favorite books ever. It is a beautiful retelling of the Arthurian legend, where Guinevere is not who we think she is. The real Guinevere has been murdered and replaced by Merlin's daughter. Magic has been outlawed in Camelot, and Guinevere goes into the castle under the guy. Guinevere goes into the castle to protect Arthur using magic, which is illegal. It's a trilogy. It is beautifully written. The world that she builds is absolutely fantastic. I actually haven't finished the trilogy. That is one series, I've talked about it on my channel before, where I just don't feel ready for the story to end. So I actually haven't read the last book yet, but I really want to. And I really, really loved The Guinevere Deception, The Camelot Betrayal, and then the last book, which The Excalibur Curse is the last one. So bummer, but it's fantastic. It is beautiful. It is like springtime magic. There is that fantasy element. The magic that they use is just perfect for spring. It's just such a beautifully written book, and it is super fast. It is like, if you need a springtime escape, I would highly recommend The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. This book I think the really only reason I associate with spring is because there's flowers on the cover, which is not much to go on, I recognize, but for some reason this book has this spring energy, and this is one that I definitely feel like I could be wrong about, but that is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I know it's supposed to be like a, not, I don't want to say a rom-com, but like a realistic fiction romance novel between like a bad boy loner and like what I think, not really a, it's not like Grumpy Sunshine, but like bad boy loner with like somebody who's like very lonely. That's the energy that I get from that book. But I for some reason feel like it would be a nice spring read. The cover is beautiful and very reminiscent of spring, so maybe that's it. I believe it's a duology though. There's a first book and a second book as far as I know. I promise the rest of my recommendations aren't just based on the cover having flowers on them. I don't have any of them here, so I am going to talk about them, but I have read them. I feel like Emily Henry books are really, really great for spring and summer. I've had like no inkling to read them in fall and winter. I feel like they feature really like warm places, warm settings. The characters are really like bubbly and energetic like in spring and summer. Particularly what I'm thinking about is Book Lovers, which is I think more of a summer read but could be a great late spring read. And I also haven't read it because it hasn't come out yet. Happy Place, her newest release, I think would also be a great spring read. It follows Nora, who is a literary agent living in New York who has a sister who's really kind of like struggling in her personal life and decides to go away to North Carolina with her for the summer, which to visit the town that her favorite book is set in North Carolina called Sunshine Falls. She has a nemesis in the editing world and she really doesn't like him. She finds out that he's actually from the same town in North Carolina where she's spending her summer, where he happens to be spending his summer. And of course, as a classic enemies to lovers trope, they fell in love in their summer in Sunshine Falls. It was just such a bright, happy book, and I feel like rom-coms like that are great because you know that they're gonna have a happy ending. So it's just something bright and happy for the spring season. Not sure about Happy Place because I haven't read it yet, but I feel like really any Emily Henry book could work. Beach read I associate more with summer, same with people we meet on vacation, but definitely I think Book Lovers would be a great springtime read. The next book that I have to talk about I also haven't read. I do have it somewhere in my moving, I don't know where, but that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. That book I know to be like a very, very light-hearted kind of inspiring, whimsical, magical tale. The way somebody described TJ Klune to me was that their books feel like a warm hug, and I feel like that's a perfect read for spring. Just something like bright and happy and positive and comforting is a great vibe for spring. From what I understand of this book, it follows this character named Linus Baker, who is, the best way I can describe it, a social worker for magical youth, where he investigates these kids who are magic and are orphaned, and he gets tasked with going to this house, this foster home, where a lot of the children are like being dangerous and their magic being used for like evil or dangerous purposes. And along the way he finds like this unlikely cast of kids. Yeah, it's very much of a found family sort of book that is just like whimsical and magical with these fairy tale kind of fantastical creatures and people and magic. And there is a really heavy responsibility that Linus has, but I think the comfort in the family that he finds outweighs his responsibility in the end. I think this is a great spring book. Like I said, it's this magical isolated island that is enchanting, and this magical world that very much parallels the real world, and finding family and keeping people together, which I think is perfect for spring. The last one that I don't have with me, I have a book by the same author in the same series, and I've mentioned this book on my channel before. It's been in springtime TBRs before and I still haven't read it. I still don't know where it is. Thank you, moving. But that is The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. She has this Regency romance series where characters kind of with like unlikely quirks or personalities go on this adventure with I think most of them are enemies to lovers, and they must partner together with like their nemesis and fall in love. The League of Gentlewomen Witches, which is about these witches living in the Regency era in England who go on this quest to find this artifact, and they have to partner up with their nemesis, who is a guy who's also trying to find this artifact. Just looking at this cover, like, this feels like epitome Regency romance spring, sort of like a fantasy historical romance, which is kind of fun. This prim and proper lady named Cecilia, who also happens to be kind of a rogue thief, has to rescue her aunt, who's been taken hostage by a pirate and his like motley crew, and she goes on this whole adventure to try and get her aunt back from the notorious Ned Lightburn. Over the course of this adventure, they end up falling in love, and it's a Regency era. This woman is definitely not like defying the social norms of her time, being a rogue and a thief, but still that Regency era spring season feels like it's really there. And we have a little bit more of a whimsical, fantastical kind of setting. Something about like spring in the Regency era in England just feels like perfect spring vibes. Now let's hop into books that I have here in front of me. I have quite a few. This feels like the perfect season to be reading these more light academia classic novels. I've mentioned like that this year I've been feeling more like reading classics, and one that I've been really wanting to read is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I feel like Persuasion, Pride and Prejudice, basically any Jane Austen has a really, really great spring light academia vibe to it. Persuasion follows this girl Anne, who had fallen in love in her youth with a captain, had fallen in love with a naval captain. Her family is kind of facing financial ruin, and she is watching her family friend fall in love with this Captain Wentworth who's returned, and she has to watch somebody very close to her fall in love with Captain Wentworth and kind of say goodbye to like him and their love, and really close that chapter, even though she's kind of held on all of these years to that love for him. And it's just so beautiful. I actually really like the Netflix adaptation that came out last year with Dakota Johnson. I love that movie. So I'm hoping to read Persuasion at some point this spring, but I think books like this and Pride and Prejudice are perfect spring vibes. I remember, I will never forget, I think it was in 2021, maybe, I started to read Pride and Prejudice, and I had a whole day where I made tea and cookies and I opened my windows for spring air, and I watched the 2005 Pride and Prejudice adaptation, and it was like the perfect spring day, and like I just romanticized my day so well. And maybe I need to do one with Persuasion once I move. Along the same lines as rom-coms, I have Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I felt like this book could be fall. I felt like this book could be spring. I think I'm definitely leaning more towards spring. I think it takes place in the spring summertime, but I think I associated this with fall because it takes place in a cabin in North Carolina, and I was going to a cabin in the fall, but I think this is definitely more of a springtime read. This just seems, like I said with rom-coms, lighthearted, happy. There will be a happy ending in a romance novel like this. Like, you can just guarantee that. And just watching two people fall in love feels like a great springtime reading experience. This is a dual timeline novel that goes back and forth from the present and the past. In the present, Macy has grown up and is engaged to this like very wealthy man. She's making a life for herself. She thinks she has her life all figured out, and then she goes home and she sees her first and only like true love, Elliot, who was her best friend, and they end up spending time together and kind of like rekindling their love, and she has to make the decision whether she will leave her fiance and be with Elliot, or close the door on the love she has for Elliot and just fully move on with her life and continue on with her wedding and marriage. I think it'll be sweet. I feel like I associate that book with like early mornings and like you can hear birds and you're drinking your coffee and getting ready for the day. I don't know why I associate it with like spring mornings specifically, but that's the energy that that book gives me. Moving on with like our cottagecore fantasy, I have Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I have been wanting to read this, but it has not felt like time yet. But now that spring is rolling around, it really does feel like time to read this, to dive in, to be in this like kind of enchanting, whimsical, very fun, fantastical world. This follows Viv, who's an orc that has decided to hang up her sword and doesn't want to do these adventures and quests anymore. She wants a slow life, just a happy, slow life. So she opens a coffee shop in her town where she invites people to come in, kind of like a tavern, but with coffee. And she hears the stories of all these people and the bards that come through. It again feels like a, maybe not found family, but like just a book of like connection and finding community and finding friendship and happiness with where you are in your life, which is something I associate with spring, is just like connecting with people and spending time with people that you love. And that's what I feel like this book is really about, just finding a fresh start and happiness and peace in your life. I think that's what spring is all about, when you reset the world and things come back to life again, and it feels like a fresh new start in spring. I also have to point out that I'm currently reading this book, and that is The Viscount Who Loved Me, Bridgerton #2. This more loosely, I feel like any Bridgerton book is a great springtime read because we're in that Regency romance era. The season in the ton is usually like spring, summertime. So we have that bright spring weather, that sunshine. Like I said, that falling in love period and watching people fall in love is just something I love for springtime. And I am currently reading The Viscount Who Loved Me. This is Anthony's story, which correlates to season 2 of the show. So we're watching Anthony and Kate fall in love. I will say the book is so far very different than the show. I'm also kind of liking this better, definitely better than the first Bridgerton book. I did not love the first Bridgerton book. There are definitely pieces I liked about the second season of the show better than what they do in this book, and there are definitely parts of the book that I think they do better here than in the show. So it's kind of a weird balance of, I like it a lot, but I can't decide which I like better, the TV show or the book. Overall, this is a way better story than the first Bridgerton book. I thought the first Bridgerton book was very much a snore. This one I think is much better. If you're not familiar with Bridgerton, it follows this family of 8 siblings, I think, and each book follows one sibling as they fall in love in the Bridgerton ton season in Regency era. So we have the Viscount Lord Bridgerton, and as he falls in love with the sister of someone he thought he was going to marry, like the girl he wanted to propose to, he ends up falling in love with the sister. This is really good. I'm really enjoying this. This is just the perfect vibe for spring. The way they describe like florals and the London homes and the London season and the London weather, I think is just perfect for springtime. The next book, I'm gonna lump them together, follow more that like academia classic book that we find in spring, and that is Anne of Green Gables and Little Women. I have this Rifle Paper Company cover of Anne of Green Gables and Little Women. I feel like because these books do travel through so many seasons, you can read them in pretty much any season, but for some reason I really associate them with spring, just like happy-go-lucky, lighthearted, like girls and kids as they grow up through these seasons. That's what I associate with. I think their time period, again, being a little bit more, maybe not Regency, but like historical, if that's the right word, being not modern, I think is just a little bit more whimsy, a little bit more enchanting than reading some books that are set in the modern time. Like I said, these have such like academia vibes for me, and I am really excited to read these. I think following along with like Anne Shirley is just something magic. It's like, it's a more of a youthful reading experience that I associate with spring, just being like lighthearted and happy and enchanted. So I think for that reason, I think Anne of Green Gables and Little Women make great spring reads. Okay, we have 2 more. This one again is another light academia, and that is The Secret Garden. I have this edition that is so pretty. This is a Penguin Threads edition, so this is like a raised embossed cover that looks like it's embroidered. Basically it follows this girl who is the daughter of 2 academics who never really wanted her, to be honest, and she's more raised by servants and people working in this house, but she is absolutely insufferable because she's raised kind of without love. Her parents pass away and she's an orphan, and she's sent to live with her aunt and uncle in this manor house in the countryside, and she finds this secret magic garden where she plays with her son, her cousin, who is sickly, and she just kind of like learns the meaning of like love and family, and I just think that that's really perfect for spring. Not to mention imagining like an English country manor with rolling greens and gardens is just perfect spring magic. And this is a quick one too, so I'd be excited to read this. That classic historical setting and presence as well, I think makes this perfect for spring. And I have one last book to talk about my spring reads. I actually read this last spring and it was perfect, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have this like illustrated fancy edition. I bought this book purely to put in a library one day, and because it's illustrated with full page illustrations, I would like love to read this book with my kids one day. But this is just like a springtime enchanting whimsical fantasy world adventure story. It is equal parts kind of dark and lighthearted. Like, it is just the adventure of a hobbit learning who he is and going on an adventure, which is just great. I always think of the Shire when I think of springtime, and it makes me so happy. When I think of the Shire, when I think of spring, I picture the Shire being springtime in a place with the birds and the flowers and the hobbit holes and the rolling greens and the sunshine. I think it's the perfect springtime place, and that's why I think The Hobbit is a great springtime read. Last year I actually did a Read With Me vlog where I read The Hobbit and romanticized my Hobbit reading experience, so I will link that video in the cards for you guys if you want to go watch it. But it is just such a happy and nostalgic story. It's whimsical and enchanting and an adventure and found family and finding who you are and a fresh start in a springtime setting. What more could you ask for? And with that, that is all of the books that I have to talk to you guys about today that feel like springtime vibes. So if you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of these recommendations, and are there any other books that you think are purely spring or that you would want to read this spring? Let me know in the comments. Leave me the little like yellow daisy flower for our emoji of the day, for a little springtime flower. I will see you guys in my next one and over on my Instagram at RoyReadingCo. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so happy to have you. Happy reading and have a wonderful day wherever you are, friends.